a break from your questions for a moment and go to the first of our Ask Me Anything segments. This is where one candidate has questions posed to them by each of the other three. There are 4 of these dotted throughout tonight's debate. Each will last around 5 minutes. Now, the order's been drawn by lots, and the lucky contestant to be drawn first was Sadiq Khan. Tessa Jal, what's your question for Sadiq?
Sadiq, will you support my plan to restore Sure Start to its founding purpose by extending the Olympic precept?
I think the idea is excellent, Tessa. You'll appreciate I've not looked at all the details of your plan, but I know as a parent and also as a governor of the primary school I attended, the difference.
But you're standing against us, Sadiq. Have you not looked at all the details? Wouldn't you normally do that?
There are 5 very good candidates standing against me. 2 of them are excluded from this evening, and they've all got great policies. Some of them are good, some of them are uncosted, some of them are pie in the sky.
According to the polls, is a front runner. If I was you, I would want to know exactly what she's saying.
Well, maybe, Ian, when I win the selection, I might ask Tessa to do that job, being in charge of the Sure Start facilities. But it's a great idea, Tessa. You know the difference it's made to families' lives since it was implemented by a Labour government, one of the proudest achievements of the Labour government.
In 1997.
Sure. I mean,
would you accept that job, Tessa, if he offered it to you, if he wins?
Listen, let's get this selection over first. I'm wholly and solely focused on being the Labour candidate. We all want that job.
But can I just say, it's a really important point. Tessa, Diane, David, Christian and Gareth all have got great policies. Some of them I agree with and I'd want to adopt. Some of them I probably wouldn't. But I don't think any of your listeners should be under the impression that we don't get on and respect each other. We certainly do.
OK, Diane Abbott, what's your question for Sadiq?
Why have you ruled out the restoration of legal aid? It's a huge issue in Hackney, access to justice. And wherever I go, particularly when I visit my local law centres, they're very worried about this government's cuts in legal aid. So why did you rule out the restoration of legal aid?
One of the things that we need to do as candidates to be Mayor of London is to be aware of what powers the Mayor of London has. Legal aid is the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice, the Lord Chancellor, a guy called Michael Goves. I don't have the power to restore legal aid. What I do have the power to do, though, is to make sure I use the City Hall as a good way of providing access to justice. I've been in talks with law centres, CABs, city firms to see how we can provide early advice on housing, on welfare benefits,
I did ask you a question.
Debt.
I did ask you a question, Sadiq. Why did you, as shadow justice spokesperson, rule out completely restoring legal aid? It's upset a lot of people in the legal sector.
Sure. Well, as I'm sure you've done the research, you'll know that's not the case. What I said I couldn't do is write a blank cheque for all the cuts made by the Conservative and Lib Dem government. What I did say is set out where a Labour government would restore some of those cuts. I'll give you some examples.
Around domestic violence, I understand.
Let me give some more examples around judicial review. I'll give you some more examples around early advice on debt and welfare benefits. I'll give you another example around law centres. I'll give you another one. Increase the amount of money spent on IT to give early advice to those who can use the internet as well.
All the same, Sadiq. People, lawyers, legal aid lawyers in London were very upset by your position.
Well, let me just reassure you, Diane, as somebody who actually did legal aid work, as I did, many legal aid lawyers are supporting me in my bid to become Mayor of London. And just this week, the former Director of Public Prosecution, who did a lot of his work on legal aid before he became the DPP, Keir Starmer, who's a new Member of Parliament, he supported me in my bid to be Mayor of London. And I'm grateful for all the support I get from lawyers and non-lawyers as well.
With respect to it, I don't think Diane was making the point about lawyer support. What the point she was making was that the poorest people in her constituency throughout London, they're the ones being affected by this, and surely they're the people that you should be standing up for.
And I have been. And you just have to look at my track record. There are advice deserts in London caused by the cuts made by the coalition government. The bill for legal aid in 2010 was £2.1 billion. By the end of the last Parliament, the bill for legal aid was £1.5 billion. You can't look at it in terms of a bill. It provides people access to justice, which means they get their day in court. The family of Stephen Lawrence, John Charles Jimenez's, the Gurkhas. We can all think of cases where people have got access to justice because of legal aid. I'm really proud that legal aid was one of the 3 pillars of the welfare state the Labour government in 1945 created.
David Lammy has a question for you.
Sadiq, you've rightly talked about rents, you've talked about a lettings agency and right to buy. What you don't seem to have a plan on is building the 60,000 homes that London needs. How will you do that?
A number of ways, David. Firstly, we've got to make sure that the Mayor of London is in charge of homes rather than setting up a quango, which will take some time to get going and also cost a lot of money. So from day one, I will set out what my supplementary planning guidance will be, an expectation on local authorities, and others what I expect in relation to housing in London. And I will say to local authorities, my expectation is wherever there's an application for a development, at least 50% should be genuinely affordable. That means with a social rent.
What does affordable mean, though?
I was going to answer, Ian, but thanks for prompting me. Either a social rent, which there's a formula based on manual workers' salary. It's £120 a week, roughly speaking. But also I'll start a new thing called a London living rent, which will be based on your earnings rather than on market value of rent. And that'll be one-third
Sadiq,
of
that's
people's
not a plan to
earnings.
build 60,000 homes. It's affordability and living rents. What's the plan to build the 60,000?
But let me get there. So firstly, if you want to be Mayor of London, you should understand how the process works. And I was
that's
a councillor for 12 years.
patronising, if I may say so. I mean, you say you're all collegiate, and yet you've been patronising to Tessa, you've been patronising to Diane, now you're being patronising to David.
Well, you're next, Ian.
Well, I probably am, but I really wouldn't recommend it.
So the London plan sets out the Bible for London's local authorities. There are 32 local authorities, and I would from day one set out a supplementary planning guidance. What I expect from the 32 local authorities.
That's a bit of guidance.
What we've got to do is make sure that we use the powers we've got, as well as make sure the government gives us more powers. So we want to make sure there is a revenue stream so we can go to the...
Sadiq, I've said, let's go to the bond markets, raise 10 billion to build. What's the plan to build the 60,000? Guidance, affordability, rents, that's not a plan to build.
Listen, it's really important that local authorities who want to build more affordable homes are given the green light from City Hall to do so. Let me tell you the concern now. The concern now is a local authority will say to a developer, I want you to build 40%, 50% more affordable homes. I want you to build more homes. The developer will say no, go round the local authority to the Mayor of London. I'll say to local authorities, have the confidence to demand more from your developers. More homes will be built. More important, David, it's the right sorts of homes. It's not a numbers game. It's homes for Londoners rather than investors in Shanghai.
I think we'll cover housing a little bit later, so let's call this to a close. Mayoral debate on LBC. I'm Ian Dale. In the next 60 minutes, the four leading Labour candidates fighting to be London Mayor are here to answer your questions. Tessa Jowell is the front runner according to the polls, but Sadiq Khan is said to be the best organised.